Ocarina of Time is one of the most important and beloved games of all time, and leading up to Ocarina's release, it was also the perfect storm of stress for Nintendo. It was the game that would see Legend of Zelda make the jump to 3D, which was a big role to fill as is, but it was also a big holiday title that they were hoping would breathe some life back into the N64 as system sales were starting to decrease. Ocarina of Time needed to make a splash, and Nintendo knew it, and so they put their money where their mouth was and marketed the game like never before. They held the largest and most expensive advertising campaign they'd ever done for a single game up to that point, to the tune of $10 million. Adjusted for inflation, that's closer to $17 million. They advertised in full force. Advertisements in magazines, tons of merchandise, and of course, game trailers. Zelda has a long and storied history when it comes to trailers. Some Zelda commercials are beloved to this day, like the Robin Williams trailers for Ocarina of Time 3DS. But there's also a legacy of bizarre Zelda commercials. There are 2 rap-based Zelda commercials.
It's the Legend of Zelda and it's really rad. Those creatures from Ganon are pretty bad.
Down with Zelda from the very start. I got the heart, it's Mars to play the part.
But the commercials for Ocarina of Time were, for the most part, surprisingly restrained. Well, for the most part. Believe it or not though, one of the commercials they released would almost get Nintendo in hot water with a government agency and would eventually end up being taken down. I should introduce our main antagonist for this story, the Independent Television Committee. In 1997, British television was regulated by a branch of the government known as the Independent Television Committee. The ITC has since been absorbed into a newer regulatory organization in Britain known as the Office of Communications. But in 1997, the ITC handled licensing and regulation of commercials to be shown on British TV. And through their regulatory powers, they were able to monitor commercials and take action to remove them from air if they found the commercials to be abusive or breaking any guidelines. As an example of how this can work, let's take a look at a commercial that got in trouble with the ITC. In the summer of 1998, the massively popular TV show The X-Files was due to release their very first foray into video games. A point-and-click title suitably called The X-Files game. Fox Interactive marketed their game on the star power of David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson, who were reprising their roles as Mulder and Scully. This marketing included television ads in the UK. In the commercial, the narrator states that somebody with a PC wanting to run the game would need 16 megabytes of RAM, 100 megabytes of free hard disk space, and a healthy dose of paranoia. However, one consumer was dismayed to learn that the game actually needed 250 megabytes of hard disk space, not 100. Since she bought the game on the basis of the commercial, she filed a complaint with the ITC, who in turn got in contact with the advertising agency. It turned out that the issue was a result of miscommunication between the ad agency and the developers. The ITC made them take the commercial down, and they re-uploaded a slightly altered commercial without the problematic information. So now that we have an idea of how the ITC functions in relation to gaming advertising, let's take a look at how they came to get involved with Ocarina of Time. If you recall, I mentioned that for Ocarina of Time, Nintendo was running a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign, and part of the reason it cost so much was because of the number of commercials they developed. Nintendo wanted the game to be a hit domestically and overseas, and this resulted in commercials being made either special for each country or at the very least localized. So keep in mind that it was specifically the English localization of a commercial that we're discussing today. In 1997, when Ocarina of Time was in full marketing swing, Nintendo released a 30-second commercial that saw airtime on British television. This commercial sat so poorly with viewers that they started complaining to the ITC. And it wasn't just like a few people. 72 people were bothered enough by the ad that they wrote into the ITC to complain and have the commercial taken down. Are you ready to see this commercial in all its offensive glory? Can you guess what the issue is? Feel free to go back and rewatch it if you need to, but I bet you can guess where the problem came from. It was from the now infamous set of lines, "Willst thou get the girl or play like one?" Now, what exactly happened, and what led to Nintendo taking the commercial down? Let's take a look at the wording of the actual complaint now, so we can get an idea of what the issue is. The ITC judgments are broken into 3 parts: the background information, the assessment, and the conclusion. First, the background information. The advertisement consisted of footage from the Nintendo Zelda game, showing a young boy medieval warrior. Sequences of superimposed text asked the player questions about how well or bravely they would play the game, ending with the question, "Willst thou get the girl or play like one?" Viewers, 15 of whom were men, complained that it was offensive and sexist, and that it would discourage girls from playing computer games because they were made to feel inferior. 4 young girls, between 10 and 11 years of age, said that they were upset because they were just as good as boys, or better than most boys, at playing the game. Other comments related to glorifying violence and encouraging bullying. So the problem seemed to come from people finding the wording of "Willst thou get the girl or play like one" to be sexist and discouraging to a female audience. Some of the complainants were little girls who said they were upset with the ad, whereas others were concerned adults who were worried about it encouraging bullying. It's interesting that 15 of the complainants were men, showing that it wasn't just a bunch of girls that were upset. So what did the ITC have to say on the matter? The assessment reads, "The ITC recognized that the sexist overtones of the phrase, 'Willst thou get the girl or play like one?' had upset some viewers and annoyed young female game players. The ITC believed, however, that such tongue-in-cheek treatments were unlikely to have the widespread negative effects that those who complained feared, and did not justify the removal of the advertisement from air. It did not agree that the advertisement glorified violence or would encourage bullying. Their ultimate decision was to not uphold the complaint. However, the complainants would get what they wanted. Nintendo was clearly nervous about coming so close to regulatory trouble, so they ended up taking the commercial down anyways, even though the ITC cleared them of any wrongdoing. Instead, they replaced it with a mostly identical commercial, with the notable change being the replacement of the 2 problematic lines. Here is the ending portion of the new commercial. I'm very glad Nintendo found a gender-neutral way to nag their audience. And that is the story of how Nintendo almost got in trouble with the British government over a Zelda commercial, and ended up pulling it from the air for good measure. Truthfully, I can understand why the people who complained felt bad. I grew up with 2 sisters who loved Ocarina of Time almost as much as I do, and I would have felt sad if they saw that ad on television and that made them feel discouraged from playing the game. Even though they cleared the commercial, the ITC agreed that the ad had pretty blatant sexist overtones. And honestly, above all else, it was just kind of cringe. The 90s in general were pretty cringe, and I say that as someone who grew up in them. And the idea of a title like Ocarina of Time being a game for boys is a relic of thought better left to the past. Then again, I truthfully doubt Nintendo had too much to do with the commercial directly, since they had a few different ad agencies working for them in those days, and the tone of basically all of their commercials is extremely different from the vibe of Ocarina of Time itself. I do think being forced to take the commercial off the air would have been a step too far, and it is better that they were able to do it willingly. Well, I hope you folks found that interesting. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you think down below. Though, as always, when we approach these sensitive subjects, try to be mature about it. Stay safe out there, but know that if anything too out of the ordinary stumbles on your path, you can always call your local regulatory body for help, because it's dangerous to go alone.